in the vast expanse of space, where stars shone like distant diamonds and planets drifted silently in their orbits. Humanity had finally taken its first steps into the wider galaxy. For centuries, Earth's people had dreamed of reaching beyond their solar system, of finding others like them more unlike them and proving that they were not alone in the universe. Now, after decades of research, experimentation, and sacrifice, they had achieved it. Humanity's ships could travel faster than light, carrying explorers, scientists, and diplomats to places once thought unreachable. The Galactic Council was waiting for them. It was an ancient organization, a coalition of civilizations from across the stars, each more advanced than the last. These beings had mastered technologies humans could barely comprehend, built empires spanning thousands of worlds, and lived for centuries or longer. To them, Earth was nothing more than a curious newcomer, a primitive species still learning how to crawl when others had already learned to fly. Ethan Carter stood at the front of the delegation, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the alien city before him. The structures were massive, towering spires made of materials that seemed to shimmer with colors no human eye could fully process. Strange creatures moved about, some walking on two legs, others floating or gliding through the air. Their forms were wildly different from anything Ethan had ever seen, yet there was something oddly familiar about the way they carried themselves with confidence, pride, and perhaps a touch of arrogance. Behind Ethan, Dr. Laura Bennett adjusted her glasses nervously. She was brilliant, one of Earth's leading astrophysicists, but this was far outside her comfort zone. Standing next to her was Captain Ryan Mitchell, a man whose steady presence reassured everyone around him. He wore the uniform of Earth's space fleet, its sleek design meant to convey strength and professionalism. Yet even he couldn't hide the tension in his posture as they approached the council chamber. "This is it," Ethan said softly, turning to face his companions. His voice was calm, but there was a flicker of determination in his eyes. "We've trained for this moment. We know what we're up against. Let's show them what we're made of." Laura nodded, though her grip tightened slightly on the datapad she held. "I just hope they take us seriously." "They won't," Ryan replied bluntly. "Not at first. But that doesn't mean we can't change their minds." As they entered the council chamber, the atmosphere shifted. The room was enormous, with high ceilings and walls adorned with glowing symbols that pulsed gently, as if alive. Rows of seats spiraled upward, occupied by representatives from countless species. Some looked humanoid, while others were so alien that Ethan struggled to identify which parts of their bodies served as heads or limbs. At the center of the room was a circular platform where Earth's delegation would stand. A hush fell over the chamber as Ethan led his team forward. All eyes were on them, some curious, some dismissive, and many openly mocking. One creature, a tall reptilian being with scales that gleamed like polished metal, leaned over to whisper to its neighbor. Its words carried clearly across the room, amplified by some unseen technology. "These are the humans. They look so fragile." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Ethan felt a pang of irritation, but forced himself to remain composed. He had expected this reaction. He had prepared for it. Still, hearing those sneers directed at his people stung. "Welcome, humans," came a deep, resonant voice. It belonged to Ambassador Krill, the reptilian figure who had spoken earlier. He rose from his seat, his movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring every moment. "You have traveled far to join us. Tell me, what do you bring to the Galactic Council?" Ethan stepped forward, meeting Krill's gaze without flinching. "We bring innovation, resilience, and a desire to learn," he said, his voice steady. "Humanity may be young compared to your civilizations, but we are eager to contribute." Krill tilted his head, his slit-like eyes narrowing. "Innovation, resilience. Those are bold claims for a species that has only recently begun exploring the stars. Your technology is primitive. Your lifespan's short. What makes you think you deserve a place among us? The question hung in the air, heavy with condescension. Ethan took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Our history is one of overcoming challenges. Where others might see limitations, we see opportunities. And while we may lack the experience of older civilizations, we offer fresh perspectives that could benefit us all. More laughter erupted, louder this time. Some council members shook their heads, amused by Ethan's audacity. Others exchanged smug glances, clearly unimpressed. Even Laura and Ryan exchanged uneasy looks, sensing the uphill battle ahead. But Ethan wasn't deterred. He scanned the room, taking in the faces of the council members. There were skeptics, yes, but also a few who watched with genuine interest. Perhaps not everyone here was closed-minded. Perhaps there was a chance to turn this tide. We understand that earning your trust will take time, Ethan continued, but we are willing to work for it. Together, we can achieve great things. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Krill spoke again, his tone dripping with mockery. Very well, human. Let us see if your actions match your words. Until then, he gestured dismissively, signaling the end of the discussion. As Ethan and his team left the chamber, the weight of the challenge ahead settled over them. The council had laughed at them, dismissed them as insignificant, but Ethan knew better. This was just the beginning. After the humiliating introduction in the council chamber, Ethan Carter and his team returned to their quarters aboard the Odyssey, Earth's flagship vessel. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Ethan sat at a small table, staring at the surface, as if trying to find answers etched into its smooth metal. Laura paced back and forth, her mind racing with frustration, while Ryan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. They didn't even give us a chance, Laura said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anger. They laughed at us like we were children playing dress-up. Ethan looked up at her, his face calm but resolute. It's exactly what I expected, he replied. The council sees us as insignificant because we're new to all of this. But that doesn't mean we can't prove them wrong. Ryan pushed off the wall and walked over to join them. Proving them wrong won't be easy, he said. Most of those council members have been around for centuries. They think they know everything about survival and progress. Convincing them otherwise is going to take more than just words. Ethan nodded. I agree. Words alone won't change their minds. We need to show them something tangible, something that proves humanity has value. Laura stopped pacing and turned to face him. Like what? What could possibly impress a group of beings who've mastered interstellar travel and live for hundreds of years? That's the question, isn't it? Ethan said, with a faint smile. He stood up and began walking toward the viewport, where the alien city stretched out below them. Its shimmering towers glowed faintly under the light of two suns. We need to think outside the box. Something unexpected. Something they wouldn't see coming? Ryan raised an eyebrow. You're talking about a gamble. Exactly, Ethan replied without hesitation. A calculated risk. If we play it safe, we'll never earn their respect. But if we do something bold, if we surprise them, it might make them reconsider. Laura frowned. Bold sounds good, but risky sounds dangerous. What happens if we fail? Then we walk away, Ethan said simply. But failure isn't an option. Not for us, not for Earth. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Ethan's words hung in the air. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. All right, let's say we go for it. What's the plan? Ethan turned back to face them, his eyes gleaming with determination. First, we need information. Something the council values or fears. Once we have that, we'll figure out how to use it to our advantage. The next day, Ethan requested access to the Council's archives, claiming it was part of Earth's effort to familiarize themselves with galactic history. To his relief, the request was granted, though Ambassador Krill made sure to add a sarcastic remark about whether humans would even understand the contents. Ignoring the insult, Ethan led Laura and Ryan into the archive chamber, a vast library filled with holographic displays and data crystals. As they sifted through the records, Laura stumbled upon something unusual, a classified report detailing the activities of a hostile species known as the Vorthok Horde. According to the document, the Vorthok were a swarm of insectoid creatures that traveled across star systems, consuming resources and wiping out entire civilizations. They operated as a single hive mind, making them nearly impossible to defeat using conventional tactics. "This is bad," Laura murmured, scrolling through the details. "Really bad. The Council knows about this threat, but they haven't done anything to stop it." Ethan leaned closer, scanning the information. Why not? Why would they ignore something like this? "It's not ignorance," Ryan said grimly. "It's fear. They're scared of the Vorthok, so they're avoiding the problem instead of dealing with it." Ethan straightened up, his mind working quickly. "This is our opportunity," he said. "If we can find a way to address the Vorthok threat, the Council will have no choice but to take us seriously." Laura looked skeptical. "Even if we come up with a solution, there's no guarantee they'll listen. They might just laugh again, or worse, try to sabotage us." "We'll cross that bridge when we get to it," Ethan replied. "Right now, we focus on finding a solution. The Vorthok operate as a hive mind, right? That means their strength lies in unity. If we can disrupt that connection—" "A weapon," Ryan finished, catching on. "Something that targets their central nervous system, or whatever passes for it." "Exactly," Ethan said. "And if we can build it, we'll show the Council that humanity isn't just capable of surviving, we're capable of thriving." Back on the Odyssey, the team got to work. Laura gathered her brightest engineers and scientists, explaining the situation and outlining their goal. Together, they brainstormed ideas, running simulations, and testing prototypes late into the night. Meanwhile, Ryan coordinated with his crew, preparing for any potential fallout from their efforts. If the Council discovered what they were doing, it could lead to serious consequences. Despite the pressure, Ethan remained focused. He knew the stakes were high, but he also believed in humanity's ability to rise to the occasion. Every challenge they had faced throughout history, from natural disasters to global conflicts, had taught them resilience and adaptability. This was no different. Days turned into weeks as the project progressed. Slowly but surely, a prototype began to take shape. It was called the Pulse Nullifier device, designed to emit a frequency capable of disrupting the Vorthok hive mind. While still experimental, early tests showed promise. Finally, the day came when Ethan felt ready to present their findings to the Council. As he prepared his speech, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. The Council had laughed at them before, but this time, things would be different. This time, humanity wasn't asking for approval. They were demanding respect. When Ethan stepped onto the platform in the Council chamber once again, he carried with him not only the hopes of his team, but of every person back on Earth. The laughter that greeted him earlier was nowhere to be found now. Instead, there was curiosity and, perhaps, a hint of unease. As the Council waited to hear what the humans had to say, Ethan took a deep breath and began to speak. Ethan stood at the center of the Council chamber, his posture straight and confident. The room was silent now, the earlier mockery replaced by a cautious curiosity. Every alien representative watched him closely, their expressions ranging from skepticism to mild interest. Ambassador Krill sat in his usual spot, his reptilian eyes narrowed, as if trying to decipher Ethan's intentions. The air felt heavy with anticipation. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," Ethan began, his voice calm but firm. When we first arrived here, many of you doubted our worth. You saw humanity as insignificant, a young species struggling to find its place among the stars. He paused, letting his words sink in. But today, I stand before you not to defend ourselves, but to offer something of value, something that could benefit us all. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some council members exchanged glances, while others leaned forward slightly, intrigued. Krill raised a scaly hand, signaling for silence. "Go on, human," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "What great gift do you bring to the galaxy?" Ethan ignored the insult and pressed on. "We have discovered a threat, one that concerns not just Earth, but every civilization represented here, the Vorthok Horde." At the mention of the name, several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even Krill's smug expression faltered for a brief moment. The Vorthok are expanding across star systems, consuming resources and destroying everything in their path, Ethan continued. Their hive mind makes them nearly unstoppable using conventional methods. Yet, despite knowing about this danger, none of you have taken action. Why is that? The question hung in the air, sharp and pointed. No one answered. Instead, the room grew quieter, the weight of Ethan's accusation settling over the council like a thick fog. Laura and Ryan stood behind him, their presence a quiet reminder of the hard work and determination that had brought them to this moment. "We understand your hesitation," Ethan said after a pause. "Facing the Vorthok is daunting, even for civilizations as advanced as yours. But humanity thrives in the face of challenges. We adapt, we innovate, and we refuse to give up without a fight." He gestured toward a holographic display that lit up beside him, showing a detailed schematic of the pulse nullifier. "This is our solution, a prototype weapon designed to disrupt the Vorthok hive mind by targeting their central communication network. We can disable their ability to coordinate attacks, giving us and you a fighting chance." The council erupted into whispers. Some representatives examined the hologram with keen interest, while others dismissed it outright, shaking their heads or muttering under their breath. Krill rose from his seat, his towering frame casting a shadow over the platform. "You expect us to believe that your primitive species has developed a weapon capable of defeating the Vorthok?" he sneered. "This is absurd." "It's not about belief," Ethan replied, meeting Krill's gaze without flinching. "It's about results. We've already conducted preliminary tests. The pulse nullifier works. And what proof do you have of these so-called tests?" Another council member asked, her voice laced with doubt. She was a slender, insect-like being with translucent wings that shimmered faintly in the light. Ethan nodded to Laura, who stepped forward holding a data pad. "Here are the results of our simulations and field trials," she explained, projecting the information onto the main screen. Graphs, charts, and video footage appeared, demonstrating the device's effectiveness in disrupting neural signals. Similar to those used by the Vorthok, the council fell silent as they studied the evidence. For the first time, there was a flicker of genuine interest in their eyes. Even Krill seemed momentarily taken aback, though he quickly masked his surprise with a dismissive snort. "Impressive, perhaps," he admitted grudgingly. "But how? Do we know this isn't some elaborate trick? How do we know you won't fail when it matters most?" Ethan smiled faintly. "That's where the gamble comes in," he said. "I propose a demonstrational live test against the Vorthok themselves. If the pulse nullifier succeeds, we prove humanity's value to the council. If it fails," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "If it fails, Earth will withdraw its petition for membership entirely." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Several council members looked shocked, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Ryan clenched his fists behind Ethan, his jaw tightening at the risk they were taking. Laura gripped the edge of the data pad, her knuckles white. They both knew what was at stake, not just their pride, but the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. Krill leaned back in his seat, a smirk spreading across his scaled face. Bold words. Human, he said. Very well. Let us see if your actions match your boasts. But remember, if you fail, no one will mourn your departure. The council convened briefly to discuss Ethan's proposal. After what felt like an eternity, they returned with their decision. We accept your challenge, announced the council's chairperson, a towering, crystalline being whose voice resonated like chimes. You will be given a chance to prove yourselves. Should you succeed, Earth's contributions will be recognized. Should you fail, the chairperson trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air as Ethan and his team left the chamber. The reality of what they had just committed to began to sink in. The pulse nullifier was promising, but it was still experimental. Testing it against actual Vorthok forces would be dangerous, perhaps even deadly. Yet, despite the risks, Ethan felt a surge of resolve. This was their opportunity to change the narrative, to show the galaxy that humanity wasn't just another minor player. They were innovators, survivors, and fighters. Back aboard the Odyssey, preparations began immediately. Engineers worked tirelessly to refine the prototype, ensuring it was ready for real-world conditions. Ryan coordinated with his crew, mapping out potential encounter zones where the Vorthok were known to operate. Meanwhile, Laura pored over every piece of data they had on the enemy, searching for any weaknesses they might exploit. You realize this is insane, right? Ryan said one evening as he joined Ethan in the ship's observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, a reminder of the vastness of space and the enormity of their task. Of course it's insane, Ethan replied with a wry smile. But sometimes, insanity is the only way to get people's attention. Ryan shook his head, though a hint of admiration crept into his expression. Just promise me one thing. Don't let this gamble cost us everything. I won't, Ethan said firmly. Not when there's so much riding on it. As the days passed, the tension aboard the Odyssey grew palpable. Everyone knew the stakes, and everyone understood the risks. But amidst the uncertainty, there was also a sense of unity, shared belief that they could pull off the impossible. Humanity had always risen to the occasion, no matter how dire the circumstances. And as Ethan looked out at the stars, he couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. This was their moment to shine, to prove that even the smallest voices could echo across the galaxy. The Odyssey drifted silently through the void of space, its sleek hull reflecting the faint light of a distant star. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, but focused. Every member of the crew knew that the upcoming test of the pulse nullifier would determine not only their fate, but also humanity's standing in the galaxy. Ethan Carter moved through the ship's corridors, checking in with his team and offering words of encouragement. Despite the pressure, he remained calm, his steady demeanor inspiring confidence in those around him. Laura Bennett sat in the engineering bay, surrounded by wires, circuits, and glowing screens. Her hands moved swiftly as she made final adjustments to the pulse nullifier. The device was compact yet powerful, its surface etched with intricate patterns designed to channel energy efficiently. Beside her, a group of engineers worked tirelessly, double-checking every connection and running simulations to ensure the prototype was ready for real-world use. How's it looking? Ethan asked, stepping into the room. It's stable for now, Laura replied, without looking up. She tightened a bolt before turning to face him. But we won't know how it performs until we're out there, facing the Vorthok directly. We've done everything we can, Ethan said reassuringly. That's all anyone can ask of us. Laura nodded, though her expression remained serious. I just hope this works. If it doesn't, she trailed off, unwilling to voice the consequences of failure. It will, Ethan said firmly. We've faced bigger challenges before, and we've always found a way to overcome them. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge, studying a holographic map of the region where they planned to confront the Vorthok. Intelligence reports indicated that a small scouting party had been detected nearby, likely gathering resources for the larger swarm. This was their chance to test the pulse nullifier under controlled conditions, without risking a full-scale invasion. "Captain," one of the officers called out, pointing to a blip on the radar screen. "We've picked up movement ahead. It matches the profile of a Vorthok vessel." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Prepare the crew for engagement. And make sure the nullifier is armed and ready." "Aye, sir," the officer replied, relaying the order. As the Odyssey approached the target area, tension filled the air. The crew moved with precision, each person knowing their role in the mission. Ethan joined Ryan on the bridge, watching as the enemy ship came into view. It was an eerie sight, a jagged insectoid craft, bristling with weapons and antennae. The Vorthok were relentless predators, their hive mind allowing them to act with perfect coordination. "They're hailing us," the communications officer announced. "Put it on speaker," Ryan ordered. A harsh, buzzing sound filled the room, followed by a series of clicks and chirps. Though unintelligible to human ears, the message was clear: surrender or be destroyed. Ethan stepped forward. "This is Ambassador Ethan Carter of Earth. We are not here to fight you, but to demonstrate our capabilities. Stand down, or face the consequences." For a moment, there was silence. Then the Vorthok ship responded with a barrage of laser fire, forcing the Odyssey to maneuver sharply to avoid being hit. "They're not interested in talking," Ryan muttered, gripping the edge of the console. "Lock weapons, and prepare to deploy the nullifier." The battle began in earnest. The Odyssey's shields absorbed several hits as Ryan skillfully piloted the ship, dodging attacks while positioning them for the counterstrike. From the engineering bay, Laura monitored the nullifier's systems, ensuring it remained operational despite the chaos. "Ready when you are," she shouted over the intercom. "Deploying now," Ryan replied, pressing a button on the control panel. The pulse nullifier activated with a low hum, sending out a wave of energy that rippled through space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, abruptly, the Vorthok ship shuddered violently, its movements becoming erratic. The coordinated assault ceased as the creatures aboard lost their connection to the hive mind. "It's working," Laura exclaimed, her voice filled with relief and excitement. "Their systems are destabilizing." On the bridge, cheers erupted as the Vorthok vessel listed helplessly, unable to retaliate. Ryan wasted no time ordering a retreat, pulling the Odyssey back to a safe distance. Within minutes, the enemy ship collapsed in on itself, its fragmented pieces drifting lifelessly through space. Ethan let out a long breath, feeling a mix of triumph and disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had succeeded. But the victory was short-lived. As the crew celebrated, Ethan noticed something troubling on the radar screen. More blips appeared, dozens of them converging rapidly on their position. The scouting party had called for reinforcements. "We need to leave now," Ethan said urgently. Ryan nodded, barking orders to set a course away from the incoming swarm. The Odyssey surged forward, its engines roaring as it fled into the depths of space. Behind them, the Vorthok fleet pursued, their numbers growing with each passing second. Back in the council chamber, news of the skirmish reached the Galactic Council. Footage of the battle, transmitted by the Odyssey, played on the main screen. The council members watched in stunned silence as the humans successfully disabled the Vorthok ship using their experimental weapon. Even Krill seemed momentarily speechless, his usual smugness replaced by a flicker of unease. "This changes things," the crystalline chairperson said finally, breaking the silence. "The humans have proven themselves capable of addressing a threat we chose to ignore. But at what cost?" Another representative asked, gesturing toward the screen. "They've alerted the Vorthok to their presence. What happens when the swarm retaliates? That is no longer our concern," Krill interjected coldly. "If the humans wish to play hero, let them face the consequences alone." Despite the mixed reactions, One thing was certain: humanity's gamble had paid off, at least for now. The Council could no longer dismiss Earth as irrelevant. Yet, as the Odyssey raced through the stars, pursued by an ever-growing horde, Ethan knew their struggle was far from over. The galaxy had taken notice of humanity, but survival would require even greater sacrifices. The Odyssey tore through the darkness of space, its engines blazing at maximum capacity. Behind it, the Vorthok fleet stretched across the void like a swarm of angry insects, their jagged ships glowing faintly against the backdrop of stars. On the bridge, Ryan Mitchell stood firm, his hands gripping the controls as he pushed the ship to its limits. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his focus never wavered. Every second counted. "Status report," Ethan barked, his voice cutting through the tension-filled air. "We're holding steady." "But they're gaining on us," Ryan replied without taking his eyes off the radar screen. "At this rate, they'll catch us within 10 minutes. Ethan clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him. The pulse nullifier had worked a feat that should have been impossible, but now they were paying the price. By disabling the scouting party, they had drawn the attention of the entire Vorthok swarm, and unlike the small group they had faced earlier, this was an army. Laura rushed onto the bridge, her face pale but determined. "I've rerouted all available power to the engines and shields," she said quickly. "But if they catch us, we won't last long in a direct fight. We need a plan?" Ethan said, pacing back and forth. "We can't outrun them forever." Ryan glanced over his shoulder. "If we could find somewhere to hide, some kind of asteroid field or nebula, it might give us enough cover to lose them." "There's nothing nearby," Laura replied, checking the navigation data. "The closest safe zone is too far away. We'd never make it." For a moment, silence fell over the bridge. The hum of the engines and the faint crackle of communications filled the room as each person wrestled with the reality of their situation. They had come so far, risked so much, only to be hunted down by the very enemy they had sought to defeat. Then, Ethan stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing as an idea began to form. "What about the nullifier?" he asked suddenly. "Can we modify it to target multiple ships at once?" Laura hesitated, considering the question. "It wasn't designed for that," she admitted. "But, maybe, if we overload the system and expand the pulse radius, we could hit more than one ship. But it would mean sacrificing the prototype, and there's no guarantee it would work. It's our best shot," Ethan said firmly. "Do it." Without another word, Laura turned and ran back toward the engineering bay, shouting orders to her team as she went. Ethan followed closely behind, leaving Ryan to keep the Odyssey flying straight, while the crew prepared for what might be their final stand. In the engineering bay, chaos reigned. Engineers scrambled to reconfigure the nullifier, their movements frantic but precise. Wires sparked, panels were torn apart, and tools clattered to the floor as they worked against the clock. Laura stood at the center of it all, her mind racing as she calculated every adjustment needed to amplify the device's power. "How much time do we have?" she asked one of her assistants. "5 minutes tops," the assistant replied grimly. Laura nodded, her hands moving faster. "We'll make it work," she muttered under her breath, though whether she was trying to convince herself or the others, she wasn't sure. Ethan watched from the doorway, feeling helpless as the engineers fought to save them. He wanted to step in, to offer some kind of assistance, but he knew this was beyond his expertise. Instead, he focused on keeping morale high. "You're doing great," he told Laura when she glanced up briefly. "Just a little longer." She managed a weak smile before returning to her task. Moments later, the nullifier let out a low whine, signaling that it was ready, or as ready as it would ever be. "Get everyone to safety," Laura ordered, stepping back from the device. "When we fire this thing, the energy surge could damage the ship." The engineers didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled out of the bay, leaving Laura and Ethan alone with the pulsating machine. Its surface glowed faintly, humming with an intensity that made the air vibrate. "You should go," Laura said, turning to Ethan. "I'll stay here to activate it." "No," Ethan replied firmly. "We're in this together." Before she could argue further, the ship rocked violently, as a barrage of Vorthok fire struck their shields. Alarms blared throughout the vessel, warning of critical damage. Time was running out. "Now or never," Ethan said, his voice steady, despite the panic rising around them. Laura nodded and pressed the activation sequence. The nullifier roared to life, its energy building rapidly. Outside, the pursuing Vorthok ships closed in, their weapons trained on the fleeing human vessel. For a brief moment, it seemed inevitable that the Odyssey would be destroyed, and then, with a deafening burst of light, the nullifier fired. The pulse rippled outward in a massive wave, engulfing the Vorthok fleet. Their ships faltered simultaneously, their hive minds shattered by the overwhelming interference. One by one, the jagged vessels drifted aimlessly, their occupants lost in confusion and disarray. On the bridge, Ryan stared in disbelief as the enemy fleet dissolved into chaos. Did we just win?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, the Odyssey shuddered violently again. The energy surge from the nullifier had taken its toll, knocking out several systems and leaving the ship vulnerable. Smoke filled the corridors, and emergency lights flickered ominously. "We need to stabilize the ship," Ethan said, rushing back to the bridge. "Ryan, get us out of here while we still can." Ryan didn't hesitate. With shaking hands, he guided the damaged vessel away from the crippled Vorthok fleet, putting as much distance between them as possible. Behind them, the swarm remained, adrift, unable to regroup or pursue. As the immediate danger passed, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. Exhaustion settled over them like a heavy blanket, but there was also a sense of triumph. Against all odds, they had survived. Back in the engineering bay, Laura slumped against a wall, her body trembling with exhaustion. Ethan joined her, sliding down beside her until they both sat on the cold metal floor. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved us." She shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "We did it. Together." For a long moment, they simply sat there, letting the weight of what they had accomplished sink in. They had faced the galaxy's most feared predators and emerged victorious not through brute force, but through ingenuity and teamwork. It was proof that humanity could hold its own, even among the stars. But as the adrenaline faded and reality set in, Ethan knew their journey was far from over. The Galactic Council had seen their success, but trust was not easily earned, and the Vorthok, though temporarily defeated, would not forget what had happened. Humanity's place in the galaxy was still fragile, held together by determination and hope yet. As Ethan looked at the weary faces of his team, he felt a quiet confidence. They had proven themselves once. They could do it again.